Welcome back, everybody, to the LPL corner. I've once again badgered my friend Ashley into joining me at her 9 a.m. in the morning in South Korea to talk about the Midseason Cup because she has been covering it live from Lowell Park and talking to a lot of the Korean teams. So thank you so much, Ashley, for waking up and joining me this morning. It means a lot. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I just want to point out and get straight to the point that when you say I've been talking to Korean teams, we are only talking about one team, which is Gen.g, which happens to be the only LCK team that has made it to the semifinals so far. Just like putting things out there. But sure.
So let's like jump right into Group A.
Hmm.
I think the big question that everyone wants to ask or talk about is what happened to T1, because this was a team that both you and I identified as kind of a favorite for this tournament. Later on in our like ESPN League of Legends show, I did say that I didn't think T1 was so far ahead that I would pick T1 over the field, but I still did think they were favorites to win this tournament. And they did not make it out of Group A. I was really shocked. I'm sure you were really like. What was I guess I kind of want to lead with this before we like dive into the actual games. What was the reaction in the press room when you realized that T1 was not making it through?
So I'm just gonna remind the viewers that it was four teams in the group A. It was T1, uh, Test Top Esports, Fun Plus Phoenix, and Diamond Gaming. And as you mentioned, many people put their hopes up on T1 for them to finish the group on first place. However, not much hope was placed on Diamond, and people, throughout the day, people got really excited. See, because Diamond was actually really turning up, and we were waiting for the last two matches to see if Diamond was going to turn up. So people were a bit surprised to see Diamond lose because they had a very solid game against FPX until the very end, which where they kind of like didn't push the bottom lane right. But and then T1 came, that everyone was just shocked because it was like a compound of everything that T1 didn't turn up, and yeah, that we were suddenly going to have two LCK teams eliminated from the MSC in the span of 2 hours. So I think it was a compound of multiple things, but people were shocked. And also, as press people, people were a bit sad because in Korea we only have witness interviews.
Yeah. And I think in the LPL press room, if I remember correctly, I think they're only doing press conferences of the winning teams as well. Um, for T1, I think the game that surprised me the most from them, because when I was talking about this group, I was like, I do think Top Esports and T1 are a cut above these other two teams.
Mm.
Not because FPX is kind of weird, right? Because they're one of those teams has the talent and the teamwork and the an idea of how they want to play. That can show up. However, based on their playoffs, I did not expect them to come out and do as well as T1 and Top Esports in this group. The thing that really concerned me about regarding T1 was their match against Damwon, actually,
Mm.
where Noguri had this really great Kennen performance, first of all, which when I was looking at this draft, I was like, I don't really know about the Kennen pick. And, sometimes Damwon does pick a few interesting things for Noguri that don't
Mm-hmm.
always work out.
Mm.
And then I was looking at this T1 comp and I was like, I love it. Like, they got Graves, first of all, which Graves, like, shouldn't really be making it through drafts right now. But then they also picked the TF, which I also loved. And Faker's TF in this game was so fun to watch. I was like, there's no way they're gonna lose this. And then they did. So I guess I know you wanted to bring up a few things about T1. One was the priority on Yasuo Gragas, right? Because we also saw it in this TF game.
Okay, so I did like some parts of T1's performance, such as you mentioned Twisted Face. I loved Faker on that champion. I loved how he was like pushing for all those aggressive backdoors. I know that some people viewed it as risky, but personally, I think it was a great execution by him. But like I've always praised T1 for its drops, but the solid drops weren't there. I saw this prioritization for Yasuo and Graga's bot lane, and that seemed to be the answer that T1 has come to counter Israel bot lane, which is much
Mm-hmm.
higher on the AD carry tier compared to the previous patch that we've seen other teams compete in. And I'm not sure, like quoting Coach Kim himself, yes, you can play off meta picks, but because after the LCK finals, he actually mentioned himself that off meta picks can play off meta picks. However, he simply thinks that the standard comp is better. And I do, even though I do believe that Teddy can play Yasuo, I simply think that he is also much more impactful at
Mm-hmm.
on AD carry. So yes, Yasuo Graga's bot lane has some interesting moments. Like it makes for some nice play highlights, but I do think that Teddy makes much more impact to the game when he's put on. I know Barris was banned all the time, but like can he have played anything else? That's my question. And if I remember the pick and bans correctly, T1 picked the jungle and then went for Yasuo Gragas. And I think one of the benefits of drafting Yasuo Gragas bot is you leave the possibility of a mid lane Yasuo until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
But T1's draft didn't really allow for it, so I think that's yeah. I think there were drops were a bit like they looked a bit lost on priority. That's what I would say, and it reflected on the performance. That's one of the criticisms I have on T1.
I have a question, just kind of to return it to this overall tournament.
Mm.
As you know, we're playing on kind of an inflated, what, 30 to 40 ping, I think. And it's also, since it's an online tournament, I think a lot of people were wondering, are teams going to use this as a testing grounds, right? Are we going to use this to try out maybe some different compositions that we haven't tried out previously? Um, I know I was actually kind of surprised at FPX's composition in game one because they drafted like Doing Karma mid is something that is like very standard for them, as is Crisp Nautilus bot. They actually did it so that if you know FPX, they could have flexed, I think, at one point, three different champions in a variety of roles, if I'm remembering the draft priority correctly. Um, but I also think that T1's Yasuo Gragas priority, it was a direct response to Ezreal, like you said. Do you think that, like, I guess in talking about T1, how seriously do you think we should take their performance at this tournament as a reflection of their overall strength?
It's only one patch, and the set like I wouldn't say sad, but something that people have to note about the current day of MSC is it's a very condensed tournament because it was never supposed to be like MSI, where it's like MSI is considered as one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that Riot looks at when it considers different regions seeds. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case for LPL and LCK. I'm just guessing, and it's a very condensed tournament, and a single day of mixed performance can get you out of the tournament, which has been the case with T1. Maybe the team was having a bad performance just for a single day. Maybe the team haven't cleared out the draft priorities just yet, and then other teams caught them really hard while they were still in that uncertain phase. But are Korean teams taking this tournament very seriously? Yes, it's more to
Oh
do
yeah.
with yeah, like the prize pool is quite huge. It might even be higher than the split winning, if I remember correctly. And also there is an ongoing rivalry between an LPL and LCK, which is highlighted even more now because LCK feels like it needs to prove itself in some way against a two times world champion.
And I think to bring up another point to kind of piggyback on this, I feel like people like to dunk on Rift Rivals a lot because in the West, for Western fans, they would watch primarily NAEU Rift Rivals, where it was a little clowny every year,
Yeah.
and Europe really, kind of put their foot into NA's face for most of it outside of the first Rift Rivals that they had, right? Whereas Korea, like when the LMS teams were added in the Rift Rivals tournament, it was kind of like they were put to the side, and it was Korea and China just trying to go at each other the entire
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
And
yeah.
teams took it way more seriously than I ever saw Western teams take their own Rift Rivals. So I do want to bring that up. Moving forward, I kind of want to talk about FPX and Damwon in tandem because I feel like these two teams are teams that I'll admit, I was really down on FPX coming in. Looking at some of their drafts specifically, like I love that you can look at an FPX draft and like take the nameplates off and you'd still know that it was FPX. Like the awesome Camille Graves Galio Senna Maokai comp that they did actually run against Damwon. Um I think in watching how FPX came out, uh this was very, very close. This game this game was just another, fans in LPL, both in China and Western fans, have been looking at FPX with Khan and either being like, Khan doesn't fit on this team, or they have to play differently around Khan. And I feel like this game against Damwon was like the exact snapshot of what an FPX team looks like with Khan in the lineup, right? He's on the Camille. He synergizes super well with Doinby's Galio. Doinby's Galio is controlling the entire game. He does make a mistake and gets killed in top lane. And it nearly costs them the game. And I don't think the game comes down to that one mistake. But I'm saying like this is if FPX continues to play with Khan, I think this is what they're gonna look like, right? They will have a higher topside priority. Khan will be focusing side waves. He loves those side waves. He might not join the team if there's a juicy side wave to be had. And then the priority is really focused on getting Doinby on a super strong pick like the Galio, where he can carry the entire team. And to piggyback on that, Tion ended up getting Graves. And while his Kindred performance, I don't know whether to chalk up Tion's Kindred performances to he's really uncomfortable with the champion. I don't think that's true because he's been praised a lot for his Kindred solo queue, and I've heard he's done well with it in scrim. So I don't know if that was a ping issue or a nerve issue or what. His Kindred did not look that good. But the Graves was great, especially with this comp. I loved this composition from FPX. But this game was really close with Damwon, and Damwon, as you mentioned, showed up in a way that I didn't expect Damwon to look as like I didn't expect these games to be as close as they were. So just what did you think of Damwon's performance, particularly? I mean, that FPX game that decided, who was going to make it out of the group between these two teams, I think was kind of the most exciting or entertaining came from them.
Like, I agree completely with your sentiment, Dad. Even though I really like that one as a team, and I do like a lot of the players, that the expectation for that team wasn't simply that high because um, this is also a test situation. Ghost has just moved into the existing roster, so I'm expecting the teamwork to still work out. And the team has always suffered from a bit of a macro slash decision making issue, and coupled with some of the previously questionable draft they have shown in the playoffs. We wondered whether they were going to hit the ceiling, but I think we were reminded that some individual players in Damwon, such as Nuguri and Showmaker, are so damn good. And even when a specific matchup looks unfavorable, they can simply outperform and come out victorious in certain team fights or skirmishes because of the prowess of individual laners. I know that, we have some amazing mid laners in this tournament, such as, Knight, Faker, BDD, but I think Showmaker, even though he only played for a day, has shown enough performance to put his name nameplate among those higher mids because I think his Syndra on the last game was spectacular. I think the issue was FunPlay's playing simply knew how to play their comp better. It was a Kang versus Nuguri matchup, and those are all two very high resource taking top laners that kills a lot and dies a lot. And FunPlus Phoenix was focusing on top lane quite heavily to make
Sure,
sure
that's funny.
yeah, to make sure that Khan is becoming this monster that can,
Mhm.
silent by himself, and Nuguri was getting killed very often. And I just think that Kenyon and the support Beryl was a bit underperforming that day too. I do think.
Earl looked really lost a lot of times on the map. He was not in a great position, and I don't know if he was like, I couldn't tell whether the team was like, okay, we want you to set up for flanks, or whether he was just trying to get forward vision and like overstepped his boundaries. The way he was playing is very dangerous to play, specifically against FPX, because they will take advantage of a fog of war really well.
So the one criticism I have for the support player of Double Gaming, Beryl, is that he looks much better on tanky champions. We
Mm-hmm.
remember him for things like the Maokai support and Nautilus and of course the Alistair that he had a great performance at last year's Rift Rivals, and I think he is simply better at positioning himself and controlling the map when he plays at initiating heavy tanky champions. And I think that was one of the reasons why he looks so lost on Karma. He
Mm-hmm.
simply doesn't know how to flank with like a very squishy. I'm gonna speed up everyone and heal everyone Karma. I don't know. That was my observation personally.
Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. I know they said that on broadcast as well. We do have to move on to the next group because we only have 45 minutes for the show. I do want to touch on top esports, but I'm gonna save most of the conversation for when we talk about them going up against Gen G. If that's okay with you, and move on to Group B. I'm gonna kick things off with IG. IG looked exactly as I expected. Exactly as I expected, which is not a compliment. I think
Rookie was trying to drag
he tried.
drag
You
up
know what?
drag up the shy and then slowly carry him to the
Pour
semifinal.
one
But
out for Rookie because
oh, he was
he
so good.
tried his best.
Yeah, he's trying.
Um, I mean, I think it's like it's kind of this 060 Lucian by the end of the game. I don't want to blame the shy for all of IG's problems because I actually don't think he is like the problem. I don't think anyone on IG is the problem. I think IG has played like this for a while. In terms of, I do think they've had some sort of hangups over the past split with their draft identity and how they've wanted to play in terms of executing specific team comps. But I think the rudimentary way that they play of just fighting and skirmishing constantly, right? Like they will take any fight. And this is something that the team has been saying since 2018 when they won the world championship. It's something that they said as recently as LPL playoffs. It's something that has hurt them in the past that we've seen. When they fall behind, they will still fight. Like they will be 10k gold down and they will still try to be fighting you. I do think that Puff and Southwind have fit on this team really well, but I don't think. I know we've talked about this a lot on the show, so I'll make it really brief. I think Puff is worse than Jackie Love. I think Southwind is better than Bowland, so it depends on how it evens out. But I do think they need to have a stronger idea of how they want to play with Puff and Southwind, and Puff and Southwind also need to be a bit more reliable for the team overall. Ning is Ning. I do think IG, whether it's Ning or not, I think IG. I maintain that IG benefits from a jungler who's more lane focused than farm focused. And that's all. I mean, IG didn't do anything that shocked me, so I just kind of wanted to get them out of the way. And let's talk. Let's kick things off with LCK teams by talking about Dragon X. I'm gonna bring up, just because this is something I see a lot, Western fans commenting on a lot since 2018. CV Max, as a coach, tends to pull out some really hyper specific draft choices in high pressure games. And when he was the coach of Griffin, this happened. And I was looking at this Akali draft, and I don't dislike it, but when you have a draft like this, you absolutely need the Akali to do well, right? Like that's really important for this team composition to work. I thought Chovy's set was great, actually. I thought his initiation were amazing. I thought he did a really great job in this game. However, the tiebreaker, I'm talking about the tiebreaker specifically, because this group was really close. Their tiebreaker against JDG, I think, overly relied on Doran really performing on this Akali, and it did not end up happening. So what did you think of Dragon X's overall performance, and more specifically that tiebreaker match that they had against JDG?
So Dragon X lost 2 games against Jingdong Gaming because they played a standard game against Jingdong Gaming, and then they had to play a tiebreaker against Jingdong Gaming. And I just wanted to double check something that's true. Yeah, like especially in Dragon X sometimes drops in a way that they have a very narrow window of win condition, which I always don't like. And this time they were always playing Kalista. And maybe they put a fate on Death to go super miles ahead Loken on the lane phase, but I think that's a bit too proud if you assume that like Loken can't hold his ground against, because he has already been doing that throughout the split of the LPL. So like Kalista is good in the lane and she's good in certain situations, such as contesting the objective, but I think Kalista is also like an AD carry that falls off really hard. At it doesn't fall off super hard, but falls off relatively hard near the end of the game. And I think,
especially
if
compared
Dragon,
to Aphelios, like
that
that first game really came down to Aphelios, right?
And even Israel, I think Israel outskills Kalista much better. If you want to play Kalista, you need some other late game carry on the other side of the map, but that's just me. And also, yeah, Akali and Set. I saw many people commenting on internet that they would have rather seen Set on top, played by Doran, and Chubby would have made much more impact with Akali, because yeah, that composition particularly didn't work out. Like I almost wonder if Carrier would have been better on champions like Tarek compared to Nautilus, which is just like a tanky support. But yeah, I don't know. And their drops weren't that like solid, and you could see that Dragon X's concentration level was slowly falling near the end of the day. But I do want to point out one thing, which is that Dragon X, because of the format of the tournament, ended up playing 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
5 or 6 hours after coming into Low Park. And this team has some very young players. Curry's only 17. Pirsik has only been a pro for 6 months, and Doran is also quite young. So just want to put it out there that I think Dragon X pulled out a really good fight. It's just that this draft issue is something that I do want Dragon X to look into at some point, because it might bite them at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The weird thing for me is I actually thought that Chovy's set was great. They actually had the early game in that tiebreaker match. It got to the point where JD, if I remember correctly, they only had like one or zero turrets. I think it was one down at like 30 minutes into the game. But the other thing I want to bring up with JDG, because I feel like I'm very critical of them specifically. Like I'm hypercritical of all LPL teams, as I've said. Like that's how I show my love. But JDG specifically, because I do think a lot of their mistakes can be quite visible, especially the mistakes they were making in the early game in the finals against TES. Um, I think this comp and the way that like the tiebreaker comp, when I look at this composition, I'm like this gives JDG everything they need. Even though I don't like Mordekaiser like in a vacuum, I think they know how to play around with Zoom's Mordekaiser really well, and it showed. I think they prioritized not only in this draft but throughout the day, putting Yagao on something that he was going to perform really well on. And in order for this team to succeed, I actually think that's super important to do in draft, because he looks insane on certain champions and struggles on others. And that's a really big part of JDG's success, I think, is also making sure that, like, obviously we talk about Kanavi, we talk about Zoom. Loken and Lumao have really risen in my estimation just as an LPL bot lane overall, with their performance, especially in playoffs. But then I think you really need to make sure that the mid lane is in a stable position, and that requires getting a good champion for Yagao. And I think the team did that with the Syndra. Teams did ban the LeBlanc, which made me happy because like you do your homework. I think it would have been kind of crazy if he'd received that champion. But yeah, I mean, like I looked at this game and I was like, okay, this is the way we're going to see JDG play probably throughout this tournament. I know the LCK casters were calling them an LCK team because of how slowly they played and how they kind of relied on these like really strong 5v5 team fights. Um, just generally, like, what were your impressions of JDG?
This is across all the LPL teams in general, except for IG. um,
We're just gonna
LPL
leave
team,
IG over there,
yeah, I think it's just there somewhere. I don't know. But the Chai still trying to split push to this date.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah. I think the top teams in LPL can macro really, really well. They know their objective timings. They know when to contest up. They know when to sideline. They know when to recall. It's just that I know that their tendency to fight sometimes overrides um, those knowledge of what is the best thing to do. But I think LPL teams have really good macro, and I think the pinnacle of that is Jingdong Gaming. Some of the map wide decision making they have made throughout this tournament was great. They looked a bit shaky on the first game. Maybe they were almost warming up to the new LPL setting because remember, like this was actually the first time those players were going back to the Shanghai venue, if I remember correctly.
They
And they
played in it. Yeah, they played in it once in finals, and that was it.
yeah, it was just a slightly different setting, which was like they
Mhm.
made a brand new setting for the Green Loop, and the players had to travel, so maybe it took a while to adjust to the Shanghai stadium again. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but it looked like LPL teams were all gaining momentum throughout the day, and Jigno
Mhm.
Gaming was one of them. Yeah.
If there's one thing I do want to give JDG credit to, it's that we've seen them do that more than a few times this year, actually, where they've like looked worse at the beginning of a series or a day than they do by the end of it.
Yeah,
That actually speaks really well to the team's overall mentality, um, and how well they communicate as a whole.
that's good.
Um, Gen G, Let's talk about them because I actually this JDG Gen G matchup I thought was really interesting. I thought both compositions, like I thought the compositions on both sides are really interesting. This is a great way to lead off the day. Um, and Gen G, we saw some like earlier aggression from them. I was so happy. I was like, yes, finally! Like you guys, like you can do it. I promise. So how would you rate Gen G's performance in this group?
I'm glad you've really liked the aggression because after the MSI match day, we had a group press conference with the Gen G players, and Ruler has come out to say that after the Spring Split LCK finals, which Gen G lost to 3-0, they have come to an epiphany that, hey, we're all really, really mechanically skilled players, and we're not playing aggressively enough. So maybe we should. Emily, are you there? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
There was
you're
the video went slow for a second. We're all extremely good players that can outskill most of the players out there in the world. So why don't we play more aggressively, more headstrongly, more just full on? And I
That's the
think,
LPL attitude. I love
yeah,
it.
like if this is true and they had this realization, it's working so far because they have much more explosive, fiery performance. Gen.g always had that moments of aggression where they go into skirmishes too willingly. I think it's like a tendency of certain players like Clit and BDD, but now they seem to have actively embraced it. Hey, this is a risky skirmish, but we're gonna go into it as a team because I actually think that we're gonna come out victorious in the skirmish. And I really like this Gen.g. And I know everyone's been talking about this, but I do want to bring it up again because he deserves so much respect. BDD has been insane throughout today.
Yeah, he
I
had a great day.
yeah.
And I think again, there's a lot of we were doing a team draft thing with ESPN and BDD kind of dropped off the radar because of finals. There's a lot of recency bias that happens when you try to talk about teams
Yeah, you can't help it.
post finals, right?
Yeah,
BDD
yeah.
had an insane split.
He was
People
the split
suddenly
MVP.
forgot that. Yeah, people suddenly forgot that after the 3-0 of SK
Mm,
of T1 in the finals.
mm.
But yeah, he had a really strong day.
Didn't he win like 3 MVPs in a row? Because you simply couldn't ban him out. Yeah, we always know that his Aziz is gonna be good. His Zoe, that's one champion that you really have to ban against Gen.g, but he was carrying on Yasuo and he was carrying on Syndra. And I'm just trying to remember the last game that he played. Oh yeah, Syndra again. But yeah, I was really surprised about the Yasuo game because when I think of BDD, he can play any champions. But recently he's been falling towards more of the control mages. But when I saw his Yasuo performance, I was reminded that this man, when he debuted at 17, was known for his set.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many good mid laners on this tournament. Like I mentioned Knight, I mentioned Faker, I mentioned Rookie, but I think BDD has really risen as the cream of the crop.
So I'm gonna kick off the discussion of playoffs by talking about JDG FPX because this is a matchup that we saw already very recently, and it was a a somewhat shocking JDG sweep. And once again, how you brought up the point that JDG tend to look more confident as days go on. That is kind of what happened in this series, where they kind of fed off of their own momentum a lot. One other thing is that Yagao got Syndra and then LeBlanc in the final game. So again, I think these are two teams that know each other really well. It's notable that in the playoffs, FPX played with Gamgoon. And I do wonder if they're going to just keep, especially since not the LPL teams aren't taking this seriously. I think they are, but especially since this is an LPL semifinal. LPL semifinals, for those who are familiar with LPL teams and watch the previous World Championship, you know that these are teams that know each other really well. They're going to be pushing each other a lot whenever they meet at international events, and this series is going to look a lot different, I think, than the top Gen G series. I do think that JDG still has the edge based on what I saw from FPX. I feel like people think I'm being too harsh on FPX, but especially if they play with Khan, I think that they still have some coordination issues when it comes to when he goes to a side lane, when he joins up. I think they might be able to fix those. They may not. It's been a kind of a glaring thing on a lot of Khan's teams. But I think this matchup is going to be really, really fun. I'm looking forward to the drafts. I have a feeling these drafts also might look radically different than what we see from Top Esports and Gen G, not just because these are two different teams, but because it's two LPL teams that know each other really, really well. The one thing I will say is that outside of I know his Kindred ults were really highly questionable, but I do think Tian actually looked better in this tournament than he did in a few cases in playoffs. So I don't know. I hope for a really fun bloodbath between these two teams. Despite the fact that JDG are known for maybe playing a bit slower, or at least for the 5v5. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of all I have to say, just because I feel like we've talked previously a lot about, or I've talked on the show with multiple guests about JDG FPX. I do want to move on to what you think of Top Esports versus Gen G, because this is based on what we've seen for the past 2 days. I think these are the two, like, quote unquote better, like stronger looking teams at this event. Would you agree or disagree?
No, I would actually agree. I would have to think about whether JDG or Test looked stronger, because I do think that Test has some issues that they might need to fix. Where Jingdong Gaming, like we said, simply performs better and better nearer to the end of the day, because I really liked their last game against Dragon X. That being said, again, going back to the press conference we had with Gen G right after the match day yesterday, it was one of the Gen G players. It was one of Clit, BDD, or Ruler that said that they believe that Tess and Gen G have quite a similar playstyle. Like, the current Gen G has a quite an aggressive playstyle where they do readily initiate fight based on the mechanical prowess of the individual players, and so does Tess. And I think it's going to be a great matchup. We'll get to see BDD versus Knight, which is deciding who is the best mid laner in the world right now. I would actually say that is how big this is. Like,
no, I don't think that's
yeah.
a crazy thing to say. I just think that some fans would probably not agree, but
I don't think that's a controversial opinion at all. So if you want to leave a comment about this, yeah, go for it. Yeah. Willow and Knife, very, very good bot laners, but Jackie Love can certainly contest them. I think Yuyan Zhao will continue playing.
Yeah, this is the pain. This is for me the kind of pain point for top, and I don't want to be like, it's weird because like we talked about the last time I really like heavily criticized Yanja was after his performance in semifinals before he did not play in finals. Or yeah, I think that was the last time. Anyway, I was talking to Kelsey about it. More specifically, a lot of his like decision making when he was on All Stars, like one specific play mid lane, I like cannot stop seeing in my head. I think that I really like this pairing. I also really like that they decided to play Yuyanja at this tournament, because I think if he, like Chocho, their other support, is a known quantity, right? Like you really know where he is. But with Yuyanja, I think there's still that, because he's a rookie, he's really young. I still think that there's the ability to improve and the ability to get that experience. And being paired with someone like Jackie Love, who's not only just like a stunning player in his own right, but has a really strong voice, I think is going to be super beneficial. So if people are wondering why I wasn't as harsh on Yuyanja's, I like may have been on other players or other supports. It is because he's so young, and I do think he still has a ceiling to improve despite like very visible mistakes. I do think if you're going to attack TES though, that is somehow destabilizing the bot lane, and forcing Yuyanja onto something where maybe Gen.g has a counter pick. I think that's actually not a bad strategy. I think one thing I do want to say about Top Esports is that 369 has been underrated going into this tournament, and I think he is great. Like, LS was going through a whole section of his laning in one of the games, and he was praising him, and I was just like, yes, please praise 369 more, because he was my Rookie of the Year last year, and I think he's been overshadowed by the likes of Zoom, because he's like, he's not the best top in the world, but he is a very, very good top laner who still has probably years worth of improvement left in him, and he's just so good. Like, I want him to do well, and I think in this Gen.g matchup, if I'm looking at a place where, Top could really take advantage of it, I do think 369, if he steps up, can hopefully perform really well.
So, that being said, I do want to also give credit to Rascal. Rascal, I think, is in a very similar situation with 369, where he gets compared to, like, and outshadowed by other good top laners in LCK, such as, well, obviously Nuguri, Keen, and even Kana those days. But because he's more of a team player than some of the more carry-oriented top laners in LCK. However, he's been spectacular on Camille. I just want to say that he knew exactly how to play around Camille and activate his team, and his Orange game was one of the things that made Gen.g achieve. Okay, but like he is a great Orange, but even though I just remember some bad moments on him on Orange, but so I think it's going to be
there are a lot of Orange players at this tournament, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I do have higher hopes for Gen.g. I'm not biased at all.
I think for Gen.g, TES is the harder one to call. I'm going, because we have to make predictions because we only have a minute left, because we have a hard out for trivia. If we're going predictions, I'm going Gen.g. TES is actually a complete toss-up for me. I am going to go JEG over FPX based on their performance in groups. Who do I want to pick?
Gen.g. Okay, I'll start.
I'll go top. I'll go top. Whatever.
Yeah, I might go with Tess, because if that means that if Tess wins, that I was right in predictions, and if Gen.g wins, I can be happy, because I cannot be free from bias, especially when it comes to regional tournaments.
I don't think any of us can. I mean, all the LPL casters have been yelling at me because they've been like, why are you so down on LPL teams? I'm like, I promise this is just how I show my love. And also messaging you at night, I'm like, we don't got this. Like, we don't got this. And you're just like, Emily, will you shut up? You're cursing all of the LCK teams.
Oh yeah, can you stop doing that, actually?
Well, all the best. Have fun in the press room tonight. And for all of Ashley's content, you should follow her on Twitter. She does an insane amount of work and has really, really great interviews. So you should check her out. I believe it's just at Ashley Kong, right? Is your actual Twitter handle. It pops up automatically for me, so I don't ever type it in. And thank you all so much for joining me. If you want to face us in trivia in 15 minutes, you can do that as I int another night away of not knowing League of Legends lore and or facts. But for more League of Legends and just general esports coverage, keep it here on twitch.tv/ESPN esports. And thank you so much for joining me again this week.